Hello and welcome to Slaying the Beast. In this series we'll be discussing well-known Magic the Gathering decks and how to defeat them. Today we'll be talking about a new deck that has taken both Modern and Standard by storm, and that deck is the Collected Company deck. If you play Constructed Magic, or have played Constructed Magic within the last year or so, you can't deny that this deck's presence is very well known. You see it everywhere from Friday Night Magic to even the main stage of the Pro Tour. Although I have talked about it before on my other videos, Collected Company decks are pretty simple. They simply use small creatures to outvalue the opposition, and with cards like, the namesake of the deck, they can do this very quickly, and even on your turn. Collected Company decks are a little bit of a curveball compared to the usual mid-range deck that runs green. Considering green is usually known for developing board presence, Collected Company essentially does the same thing, just on your turn. Considering all Collected Company decks are different and no two lists are exactly alike, I'll be doing my best to cover the strategies and cards that can take care of every one of them, even though they may not always be true for each deck, depending on the list. But keep in mind though, most Collected Company decks run the same way. They just want to develop their board state with small, efficient creatures that give you a ton of value. Before we talk about cards that are good against Collected Company, let's talk about some ground rules when facing the deck. The first thing you want to keep in mind about Collected Company is more than likely, like 9 times out of 10, they're going to drop Collected Company at the end of your turn. This means that they're going to be able to pick 2 creatures in the top 6 cards of their deck and throw them out there, gain any value from enter the battlefield abilities, and then be able to attack with them on their turn. You want to be prepared for this. You basically have to keep in mind, if you're playing against a green deck that has 4 mana open or has the ability to generate 4 mana on your turn, then you're more likely going to be set up with a Collected Company. Although the creatures of Collected Company are usually really good at generating value, a lot of them are mainly there for that purpose. They're really not that large. Just because of this, if you play a larger creature, you can have a good chance of playing a fair game of Magic between Collected Company decks. However, just keep in mind, even if you are able to stabilize after the first Collected Company, you're never safe. The deck is full of creatures, regardless of what format you play it in. It's very, very hard to stabilize entirely, just because every draw they have is a live draw. This can be incredibly difficult in Modern, considering in addition to Collected Company, most other Collected Company decks run Court of Calling, so they can basically fetch whatever they want. If you're playing against Collected Company in Modern, you have to keep in mind that Collected Company decks, in a sense, were kind of I guess you could call it the last genetic strain of the Birthing Pod decks, and therefore they actually run a lot of the same combos that those decks used to run. The most infamous of these being the Kitchen Finks with the Saraseer, which is a very nasty infinite life combo. They do need an additional stabilizer to keep the Kitchen Finks alive, like Melira Sylvok Outcast, but that can give them infinite life. So if you're playing Modern against Collected Company, that is one thing that can happen. And there are actually other combos that do this, that are within the deck, or can potentially be within the deck, so just keep that in mind. If you're playing an aggressive deck against Collected Company, it can be kind of difficult to keep up, considering Collected Company decks like to run a lot of life-gaining creatures. I know several of them run Zulaport Cutthroat and a Sack Outlet to gain a bunch of life. In Modern, you gotta watch out for Kitchen Finks, like I mentioned before. But if you are running an aggressive deck, a great card that I would recommend, if you, at least if you run red-green, is a Tarkus Command, considering it's a very versatile card, and you need to keep up with a versatile deck with versatile cards, and at the same time it snuffs out life gain. My personal favorite card to deal with Collected Company, the card itself, is Hallowed Moonlight. This is a standard legal card that doesn't see as much play as I think it should, just because Collected Company is just everywhere now, at least in Standard at the moment. But it's also a fantastic card in Modern. It's not only good against Collected Company, but it's also great against decks that like to do other unfair things like Reanimator or Through the Breach, or it's even good against tokens. If tokens try to go long against you and try to use something like Lingering Souls, you can use a Hallowed Moonlight to kill some of the tokens. Unfortunately, not everyone plays white, so if you don't play white, blue has a lot of good answers. Counterspells are obviously one of them. For standard, I feel like, oddly enough, the best counterspell is something that can take care of both instants and creatures, because most Collected Company decks are just made of instants and creatures. This spell is obviously the most efficient of these, that at least deals with the instant part. But if you want something that takes care of everything, you may just want to try a good old-fashioned hard counter, considering even though 3 mana might seem like a lot for a counterspell to some people, it's actually going to be fine in this matchup, considering you will, regardless if you're on the play or on the draw, you should have at least 3 mana if you hit your land drops before the Collected Company player casts a Collected Company. Hand attack is also a good option. In standard, a lot of people think Duress is not the greatest, considering it only really hits Collected Company. But in modern, you have a lot better options. I feel like Inquisition is okay. I feel like a lot of the creatures that cast efficiently will still make a difference in the early game. But you have to keep in mind you won't be able to take a Collected Company with Inquisition. Thoughtseize is alright too, especially if your opponent has not the best hand, but you have to keep in mind this deck is a deck that wins fair, and so your life total is going to matter. Even though Collected Company is the namesake of the deck, even though it's named after a big important card in the deck, it's not a deck that loses to a card like Surgical Extraction, like a lot of combo decks that are named after cards themselves. If anything, I feel like some of the best black non-creature spells you can run are board wipes. My personal favorite being Consume the Meek. Yeah, it does cost 5 mana, but it's an extremely rewarding feeling to board wipe everything at the start of your opponent's turn after they have cast a Collected Company, which is pretty devastating for a Collected Company player. Oddly enough, red has some good board wipes too at instant speed, although it may not always be relevant. There is Volcanic Fallout. I know that some of the creatures the Collected Company deck does run not always have 2 toughness, but still it's nice to have when they try to outspeed you at the end of your turn, and they're going to try to get that boost pretty often. If you play Standard, I think a good alternative to this would be Kozilek's Return. It's essentially very similar to Volcanic Fallout, except it can be countered, but just keep in mind that sometimes it won't get everything that the Collected Company player has, because sometimes they run big things like the what's it called, that Tarmogoyf wannabe thing. Speaking of Tarmogoyfs, Tarmogoyf, oddly enough, is oddly bigger than most of the creatures in Collected Company. I know not everyone can afford Tarmogoyfs, but it actually is not too shabby, considering that in Modern, a lot of the creatures that the deck will run are pretty small and really don't have a lot of power or toughness, and are, like I said, are mainly just there for value or an attempt to get a combo going. In Standard, if you're trying to have a fair grindy game against Collected Company, you need to have things that are bigger. At the same time, you need to have creatures that generate quite a bit of value at the same time to keep up with the Collected Company player and all the value that they generate. Considering that Collected Company really likes to have fair grindy games of Magic by attacking with lots of creatures, my personal favorite card to try to use this against this deck for Standard is Archangel of Tides, and it's pretty easy to see why, considering that you're going to be attacked with a lot of creatures, and you're going to want to get through to damage your opponents. Although it totally was a big face wrecker in Modern, I'm surprised that Reality Smasher has not really seen a whole lot of Standard play against the Collected Company deck, considering that it tramples and it's bigger than just about everything, unless somehow they can get a Tireless Tracker to get bigger than it. But this thing is an absolute monster in this matchup, and considering Collected Company decks don't run a whole lot of removal, it's something that they have to deal with, and I feel like it's a very, very excellent creature in this matchup. So now that you know what to do, if you know that Collected Company is going to be played at your next sanctioned event, Feel free to follow these strategies, and if you play your cards right, you will slay the beast. I hope this has been of some help to you. If there's a deck you're having trouble beating, feel free to let me know about it in the comment section below, and I'll make an episode about how to beat that deck. Again, thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and consume that subscribe button. I'm sure it's delicious. My name is Ryu Spectre, and I'll see you all next time.